جزاكم الله خير. احنا ممنونين ومشكورين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب أرني الحق حقا فأتبعه والباطل باطلا فأجتنبه ولا تجعله متشابها علي فاتبع هواي بغير علم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So today, inshallah, we have reached lesson 7, and we will be speaking about the greatest right of Allah, Haqqullah al-Akbar. In order to do so, we will cover several things. First, a short introduction about this lesson, and then we'll go right into the Treatise of Rights of Imam Al-Sajjad. We'll learn a little about it. We'll learn about the greatest right of Allah, and we'll learn about the right of the self as well, inshallah. So, as an introduction, what we want to look at is we want to be able to compare between nations and Islam, okay? And you'll see why in a minute. Because you see, when you look at nations, the way that they're built is based on a constitution, and the way that they're maintained is by a system of laws. Agreed?
Yes, agreed.
Yes.
Right? So what does the Constitution do? Well, the purpose of the Constitution is to establish the rights of the citizens. That's number one. And number two, it's the very foundation. So it provides and establishes the foundations upon which the country must be run. So, for example, in the US Constitution, it consists of both the rights of the citizens and the foundations upon which the country is based, which represents the ethical system of the country. It is a system of ethics, okay, such as freedom of expression, or, for example, the right to bear arms, or, whatever other rights are placed in there. Now, the laws, on the other hand, in order to maintain the constitutional principles upon which the country is based and the rights of all citizens, a nation must enforce laws, a system of law, to ensure that all people, whether they're citizens or they're residents or they're visitors, that they all abide by the laws that ensure, number one, that the founding principles are upheld, number two, that the rights of its citizens are not violated, and number three, that the safety and security is maintained by enforcing a penal system, right? A system of fining people or a system of holding them responsible for their actions, right? And I want you to note something here, that every constitution is based on a system of ethics that the founders of the nation wanted to preserve to ensure human dignity, safety, and the prosperity of all of its citizens. There isn't a constitution that, doesn't want to do that. That's the whole purpose of it, right? Okay, so we also know that for example, in the US, there's something called the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And it starts off by pledging allegiance to the flag. Every country has some Pledge of Allegiance. Like, for example, in the Arab world, I know that at the beginning of every day, right, we'd have a morning assembly at school. This is what I remember when I was a kid. We'd have a morning assembly at school. Then they'd raise the first, they'd raise the flag. They'd play the national anthem, and we'd all have to repeat the national anthem. Am I right? Isn't that usually what happens in the Middle East?
That is correct.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
And then, other than that, the teachers will come along and check your fingers, make sure your nails are cut. They'll look at your uniform, make sure you're nice and clean and organized, right? So, but the main thing here is that every country has something similar to this Pledge of Allegiance, whether it's because the Pledge of Allegiance starts with, I'm not American, I'm Canadian, Iraqi Canadian. So, but I know in the American system, when they would do the Pledge of Allegiance, it would say, I pledge allegiance to the flag, and then something else, right? So that means that they're building a system that is or a system within each person in which they feel a sense of being patriotic to their country, right? And that's what the whole assembly at the beginning of school is, and the raising of the flag and the memorizing the national anthem of that country, right? To show your allegiance to this land. So in every nation, every citizen pledges their allegiance to their country. This pledge of allegiance is a promise of their nation, to their nation, that they will do the following: that they will be loyal to it, they will abide by the Constitution, and they will maintain its laws. Agreed?
Agreed.
Good. So what about Islam? In Islam, Allah Almighty established three things. He established a system of ethics, He established the Bill of Rights, and He established the system of law. Okay? Got it? If you got it, say khosh.
Oh, Sheikh.
Good. So the system of ethics, it's based upon our relationship with God. So it basically it's going to ensure that we have an ethical system between us and our Lord. And it also deals with our relationship with our surroundings, including other humans mainly. Okay. So, of course, other humans and their property as well. So their property would fall under that as well, okay? In terms of the system of ethics. Now, what are these specific rights that God has, or that, the people around me have, or, my siblings have, or my friends have? The details of these rights, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us through the words of Prophet Muhammad and our Imams alayhim afdal salatu salam. And they're the ones that tell us the rights of all things. And the best document that outlines them all in detail is called the Treatise of Rights, Risalat al-Huquq. Now, how many of you have a copy of the Treatise of Rights or Risalat al-Huquq in your... How many of you have a copy of the Treatise of Rights on your phone or in your library? Risalat al-Huquq. Anyone? No one? So this is a must-have. You have to have
I
this
have
on your
5.
phone. You have it? Yeah.
I have a couple of them.
Good, good. So you have to have a copy. If you don't have a hard copy, then make sure you have a soft copy of it on your phone, okay? And on your spare time, just read through it. It's very beneficial. We cover this in this series. We start covering it in this series. Today is the first day we start covering it, okay? But because now that you learned in the first series the existence of Allah, his right upon you, and so on, and you determine this intellectually, now we want to know, is that reflected in the words of our Imams or not? That I have to dedicate all of me to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does it say that anywhere? And we'll see that it does say that in Allah's greatest right, right? All my faculties, like my eyesight and my hands and everything else like that. Yes, it says that in the right of the nafs, the self, which we'll also get to as well. Okay. Oh, so what about the right of someone who consults me? Oh, it includes the rights of a consultant, of a consultee, the right of an employer and of an employee, the right of the imam of the jama'ah, the right of the ma'mum, the right of a salah, the right of a psalm, the right of zakah, the right of... Everything has a right, and it's been outlined in detail within Risalat al-Huquq. So this tells me then the decisions that I need to make are these decisions first and foremost. I have to give Allah first his right, and then myself its right, and then everybody else their rights as well. But how am I going to know what those rights are unless I have the Treatise of Rights? And that's why I'm saying it's important for you to have a copy of it. And I'm just going to put you on the path. I do have a more detailed coursework that's just the Treatise of Rights. Inshallah, we'll get to that one day, bi'awnihi ta'ala, maybe in the next month of Ramadan or something. Okay, so we've got so far the system of ethics that we talked about, the Bill of Rights that we talked about. Then we have the system of law. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes a system of laws to ensure that the integrity of the religion is maintained by protecting the ethics and principles of the religion, and also B, that the rights of all are protected, including Allah, and lastly, that man lives in safety and security. So let's look at the Treatise of Rights. Now, before we start, you might say, well, why should I follow the Treatise of Rights? I can just wing it. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Holy Quran, in the chapter of Al-Ahzab, chapter 33, verse 21, he says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, that you have in the Messenger of Allah a great exemplar, an example for you to follow. This is for whom? لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر. For those who want to please Allah and want the reward of the hereafter, right? Then this is what you'll do. You'll walk in the footsteps of the Holy Prophet, know what his sunnah is, follow what he says, what he does, and what he agrees to. And then he says, وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. So he's giving you the formula. He's telling you, look, if you want to be at the level that will allow you to please me and to enter heaven, then you have to follow in the footsteps of the Prophet. Well, how am I going to do that? You have to be of those who always remember Allah. وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. Okay? Got it? If you got it, say got it.
Got it. Got
So
it.
then how can I follow in the footsteps of the Prophet? By following the Sunnah. And what is the Sunnah? The Sunnah is, we said, whatever the Prophet said
Or
or
agreed
or accepted.
or accept.
Yeah. Okay. In Arabic, we say قول الرسول, فعل الرسول, وتقرير الرسول. Okay. All right. So does the Sunnah include the Imams alayhim as-salam? Yes, of course it does. Since Allah Almighty completed the religion through our Imams, through the system of Imamat, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. On this day, I have perfected for you my religion. I've completed upon you all of my blessings, right? And I've accepted this religion as a religion for you now to follow. This didn't occur, right, just by itself. It occurred with the condition that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam announces the successorship of or the imamate of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullahi alayhi, right, on the event of Ghadir Khum. And of course, we said that he, inshallah, we learned in the series before this that the Prophet did this at the beginning of the message. He did this throughout the message, in the middle of the message, and at the end of the message. Okay, so that tells us then those who will preserve the faith, right, are those who Allah gave them that successorship, that leadership after Prophet Muhammad, right? And in chapter 4, verse 59, we said Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari asked the Holy Prophet, and he named them all by name, right? From Imam Ali all the way to Imam al-Hujjaj, Allah Ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif. So that means then they are the gatekeepers and the best exemplars and the preservers of the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wa alih, because they would live, act, and maintain the religion as the Prophet did and as Allah intended. And it's Allah who appointed them to this very important role. And of course, we prove that it's Allah as well who purified them, right? In the chapter of, or the verse of Tathir, chapter 33, verse 33. So what is the best one-stop shop then for how the Prophet treated all things? Well, the hadith, of course, is the best source, other than the Holy Quran, I mean. And more specifically, a comprehensive document directly from our Imams are these two documents, the Treatise of Rights and the Sahih Al-Sajjadiyah. Now, in this series, we cover some of the Treatises of Rights, Risalat al-Huquq. When we get to series 4, we cover Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, which is from a Sahih Al-Sajjadiyah. But a Sahih Al-Sajjadiyah has a dua for everything. It's basically a book of dua. All right, so the Treatise of Rights is then a Bill of Rights. It's the legacy of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, because Imam Al-Sajjad was the son of Imam Hussein. And he wrote this after Karbala. So that means this is the legacy of Imam Hussein. And therefore, it's the legacy of Prophet Muhammad. And that represents what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, okay? Or it represents what Allah expects of us. It represents what Allah Almighty wants us to know about our relationship with all things and how to act towards each of those things. Lastly, it covers everything from the right of Allah to the right of ourselves, to the rights of our parents, our siblings, our friends, leaders, the poor, prayer, charity, fasting, etc. So now, let's look at the greatest right of Allah. وَأَمَّا حَقُّ اللَّهِ الْأَكْبَرِ عَلَيْكَ. As for Allah's greatest right upon you, فَأَن تَعْبُدَهُ. For it is that you worship Him. لَا تُشْرِكْ بِهِ شَيْئًا. That you should not ascribe a partner to Him. That's two things. فَإِذَا فَعَلْتَ ذَلِكَ بِإِخْلَاص. If you do so with sincerity, جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ أَن يَكْفِيَكَ أَمْرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. Allah will make it compulsory, mandatory, obligatory upon Himself that He will give you sufficiency in this world and in the hereafter. Just that? No. The Imam continues, he says, وَأَن يَحْفَظَ لَكَ مَا تُحِبُّ مِنْهَا. And Allah will preserve for you what you love from this world. So if you're in heaven, and let's say your dad isn't in heaven, you can literally intercede for him. You know, if he's in a lower level and you're in a higher level, you can intercede for him because you say, look, I want him with me, you know, and Allah will provide that for you. As long as you do what? You worship Allah, right? Because that's a sign of your gratitude and thankfulness to Him. And number two, you don't ascribe a partner to Him. Okay. And lastly, you do it with sincerity. So the question is, what is the level of sincerity that I have to have? And what is this level of ibadah as well? Okay. But what can be learned first from this first right is that we're able to deduce with simple intellectual reasoning that what we deduced before in the theology class, if you remember, we said, since Allah created me, He's the all-perfect, He gave me worth and value when He created me, right? And I have to show Him my gratitude and my appreciation, and I'm going to, that's going to be my greatest purpose in life, right? Because He has the greatest right upon me, even greater than my parents who brought me to this world. Why? Because He created them. He created their parents, and He gave me the very breath with which I breathe and the very existence with which I know Him, right? So then this proves that how I was thinking was correct. In order for you to know if how you were thinking was correct, you have to corroborate it. You have to have a reference point, right? And this tells us clearly that as a reference, Imam Al-Sajjad salamullahi alayhi, it's telling me that how I was thinking was correct, okay? So that's number one. Number two, I have to dedicate all my faculties that He gave me to Allah and Allah alone. So my intellect, my body, my emotions, everything. Sincerity to Allah is key. If we do so, Allah will give us sufficiency in this world and in the hereafter. So what's meant by sincerity here? Full dedication of oneself to Allah. Therefore, one must know their self to know Allah's position and His right upon them. Now, what is meant by sufficiency here? Sufficiency means fulfillment. Everybody wants to feel a sense of fulfillment. Am I right? If I'm right, tell me I'm right.
Yes.
Correct.
We always hear this whole thing of, oh, I just want to be happy. But really, we know that when life isn't all happiness. You have happiness and you have sadness. There are days when you're happy, there are days when you're sad. But what you're really looking for is fulfillment, right? A sense of fulfillment, a sense of contentment, to be content with your life, to be content with what you have, to be content with your existence, right? To have that sense of fulfillment is really what we want. Agreed?
Yes.
Right? So that's what's meant by sufficiency here then. So what does that mean that Allah wants me to dedicate all myself to Him fully? To please Allah, I have to control myself, right? Control it in the way He wants me to control it. If I please the unlimited in this world, He will please me in this world and in the hereafter. And sufficiency in this world doesn't mean happiness. It means contentment and fulfillment with what Allah has given you. Inshallah, in the next class, we'll talk about self-control. We'll cover the right of the self, and we'll see how that relates to Iman and faith. Until then, we say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Mursaleen, wal Fatiha ala arwah al-marhumin, masbuqatan mashfu'atan wa salati ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, tomorrow, if you have any questions, we can, since we were running late today, we can tackle your questions tomorrow, inshallah. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Alaikum assalam.